What if I told you that the downfall of one of the greatest kings in history wasn't due to an enemy army, but to something far closer to home? King Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, made a shocking mistake. A mistake that could have been easily avoided if he had listened to his own wisdom. And it had everything to do with who he trusted. But here's the twist. This warning still holds true for us today. Let me ask you, have you ever trusted someone who deep down you knew wasn't right for you? The consequences of ignoring trust are more serious than you think. Stay with me to learn what Solomon's story can teach us about trust, relationships, and the shocking mistake he made. Welcome back. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating and at the same time heartbreaking stories from the Bible, the life and downfall of King Solomon. Solomon, blessed with unmatched wisdom, made one major mistake that changed everything. His mistake? Trusting the wrong people, especially when it came to relationships. What happened to him serves as a warning for all of us, no matter who we are. Stick with me as we unravel Solomon's wisdom, his fall from grace, and how we can avoid making the same mistake in our own lives. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Solomon's warning is more crucial than ever. Let's start by looking at the greatness of Solomon. Solomon wasn't just a king, he was the epitome of wisdom. When God asked him what he wanted, Solomon didn't ask for riches or power. He asked for wisdom, and God granted it. Solomon became renowned for his incredible insight, his ability to solve problems, and his deep understanding of life. People came from far and wide just to hear him speak. But even Solomon, with all his wisdom, made a fatal mistake in his relationships. A mistake that would unravel everything he worked for. So, how did someone as wise as Solomon end up making such a monumental mistake? Well, it starts with his many marriages. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Yes, you heard that right. 1,000 women in his life. At first, these marriages were political moves to strengthen alliances with surrounding nations. But as time passed, these women were no longer just political figures. They began to influence Solomon in ways he never expected. And here's where it gets interesting. Many of these wives weren't from Israel. They came from foreign lands, bringing with them their own gods, idols, and ways of life. Solomon, the wisest man to ever live, started to let his guard down and allowed these foreign influences into his heart. It was his first step toward disaster. But what exactly happened when these influences took hold of Solomon? As Solomon aged, the influence of his foreign wives grew stronger. These women weren't just influencing his decisions, they were influencing his faith. Slowly but surely, Solomon allowed idol worship to take root in his kingdom. The man who had once built a magnificent temple for God was now allowing altars to be set up for false gods in his own backyard. Can you imagine the heartbreak? God had warned Solomon directly, telling him not to marry foreign women because they would turn his heart away from him. Yet Solomon, in his pride and trust in his own wisdom, ignored the warning. But what happened next is where things take a darker turn. Solomon didn't just lose his faith, his entire kingdom began to crumble. So what's the takeaway from Solomon's story? The warning is crystal clear. Never trust someone who leads you away from your faith, your values, and your beliefs. Solomon's downfall wasn't about trusting women. It was about trusting people who didn't share his core values. It wasn't just the foreign women in his life. It was anyone who could influence him to turn away from his purpose. Solomon's downfall didn't happen overnight. It was a gradual slide into disaster, all because he allowed others to dictate his path. But how does this apply to our lives today? Let's look at how misplaced trust can lead to disastrous consequences. Trust is like a bond. It holds everything together. When you trust the right people, your life can flourish. But when that trust is misplaced, it can have serious consequences. Solomon's kingdom began to fall apart as his faith and trust in God eroded. And it didn't stop there. His personal life, his leadership, and his people suffered because of his misplaced trust. It's easy to overlook the power of trust until you experience the fallout. Solomon's life shows us that the people we trust have the power to shape our future. So how do we recognize when trust is being broken? Let's break it down. There are red flags we need to watch out for when it comes to trust. First, if someone consistently encourages you to stray from your values or beliefs. That's a huge warning sign. Second, if someone manipulates you into making decisions that harm your well-being, it's time to step back. Lastly, trust is built on consistency. If someone's actions don't align with their words, you're dealing with a problem. Solomon's mistake was ignoring these signs. His heart was led astray, and he didn't recognize the slow erosion of his values. But what happens when trust is broken, and what can we do to rebuild it? Let's discuss that. When trust is broken, the damage is real. But it's not the end of the road. The first step is acknowledging the pain and understanding where things went wrong. Solomon could have turned back, sought forgiveness, and restored his relationship with God, but he didn't. For us, the path to recovery involves rebuilding the foundation of trust in our relationships. Start by setting clear boundaries, being honest, and learning from past mistakes. It won't be easy, but it's possible to rebuild trust if you're committed. Now let's talk about the long-term impact of Solomon's mistake. How did it affect not just him, but his kingdom? Solomon's story is a tragic one, not just for him, but for Israel. Because of Solomon's decisions, the kingdom was eventually divided into two, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. The consequences of his misplaced trust were felt for generations. If Solomon had been more careful about who he trusted, he could have avoided the downfall of an entire nation. His story is a stark reminder that our actions don't just affect us, they can ripple out to the people we love and the world around us. So how do we avoid making the same mistake Solomon did? Let's look at the steps we can take. To trust wisely, we must first be aware of our core values and guard them fiercely. Surround yourself with people who share your faith, your principles, and your purpose. And be vigilant, because like Solomon, we can easily be influenced if we aren't careful. Trust is a gift, and it should be given to those who will protect it, not exploit it. Be wise, be cautious, and don't let anyone steer you away from the path that God has set for you. Let's finish up with a final thought. Solomon's legacy isn't just about wealth or wisdom, it's about the lessons we can learn from his mistakes. The warning he left behind about trusting those who don't align with your values is timeless. Trust wisely, and remember, the people you choose to trust can either lift you up or tear you down. Don't make the same mistake Solomon did. Let his story be a guide for you, so you can avoid the heartache and consequences he faced. Thank you for watching. Solomon's story is a powerful reminder of how important trust is. If you've learned something today, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.